Hey, what's going on, y'all? It's Jay Myrex of ultrawest.com. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the True Sound Creators Podcast. Now, we said we're going to do more audio, and we're going to really do it with this True Sound Creators Podcast, okay? So, in this podcast, we're going to talk about things related to audio and sound excellence and music production excellence. So we want to just talk about things that will help us to get better within the craft of music production, audio, sound design, and other related skill sets within this domain. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about why editing is one of the most important skill sets that any music producer can have today. I would argue that it is the most important skill set today. Now, a lot of times we talk about mixing and we talk about programming and keyboard playing and beat making and all these other skill sets that come with the music production world. But not enough attention is given to editing. And over the course of today's episode, you'll get a better idea of how editing can really separate you from the rest of the pack as a music producer. So just some words before we get started. If you haven't already done so, make sure that you visit www.ultrawest.com to sign up for the free 6-part video course called Sound Mind Sessions that we're giving away for free. It is a video course that is aimed to inspire you, to teach you, and to help you to thrive as a music producer. It's 6 parts delivered over 6 days, and we talk about everything, including how to create your own lane within music production, how to find clients, what gear you should have, how to finish projects, and a lot more. So it's a highly valuable video course. I highly recommend that you go and just sign up for it. It's free at ultrawest.com right now. So now we're going to get to this topic of editing and why editing is quite possibly one of the most slept on skill sets that is not talked about enough in a lot of these music production videos and music production articles and whatnot that are out there right now. Editing is really one of the most important stages of any type of audio production or any production that includes audio. When we're talking about professional applications, there's always some degree of editing. I don't care what the format is or the application is. It could be for songs, it could be for television, film, audio books, podcasting, whatever. Audio editing is super important, and editing in general, I should say, is super important for any type of professional production. Editing really is what separates the boys from the men in the professional world, because any type of production that is going to be released for public consumption has to have some degree of editing in order for it to be considered final. Usually editing is part of what we would call post-production, and it's the process of going through all of the content, the recorded content, and the content that was added by other means. It's about going through that content and making sure everything is in the right place with the right timing, with the right sound. It's really making sure that everything is in the right place. And editing is one of those tasks that a lot of people don't want to do. You know, we talk about what holds people back in their music production. And I would say that arguably the biggest amount of work in music production is the editing, because editing has to take place before a full mix can happen as well. You know, we focus a lot on mixing and how to EQ and how to apply dynamics and how to apply all these different effects and panning and, you know, how to get the optimal levels and optimal sound. But you won't get any of that before you get a fully edited song or fully edited production. You have to edit. And a lot of producers need to start looking at editing and acquiring that skill because, first of all, editing is going to force you to pay attention to details. It's super important that you get detail oriented as a music producer because that is really what allows you to make sure that your audio and your production is at the highest quality level possible. So getting into editing, becoming detail oriented will help you because it will make you become more patient with the process. And one of the problems I find with a lot of music producers when they say that they don't finish their songs or have a problem finishing their songs, usually it's because they have a problem with patience. The process takes time, the process is work, and the faster that you can get into a habit of really taking time with your editing, the stronger you will be as a music producer. And you'll find that you have a stronger ability to finish projects because you'll have the skill set necessary to get the audio and the full production in a shape that is much more consumable and just better sounding overall. So editing really forces you to pay attention to the minor details that can make or break a production. A lot of people tend to equate editing with cheating, but editing is not really cheating. Editing is a part of producing a professional product. You know, editing is also one of the best ways to program realistic MIDI parts. You know, we focus a lot on being able to play keyboards and instruments well, and I don't think that there's any problem with practicing your keyboards and getting good as a keyboard player. I think it's a great skill to have. It's very important. I think that just being able to play in general allows you to come up with ideas and allows you to be more flexible as a music producer. But when we start talking about programming, especially when we are dealing with acoustic instruments and also even electronic instruments, editing can really make the difference between a realistic sounding performance and a really fake sounding performance. A lot of the articulations for different instruments like guitars and basses and strings and whatnot are best programmed with a more detailed MIDI editing. So there might be key switching, or there might be certain types of volume edits that you may need to do in order to get the passage to play in a more natural way. And I don't care if you're the best keyboard player on earth. At the end of the day, when you're dealing with MIDI, because you're dealing with a digital representation of something, you have to be willing to take that extra step to edit the MIDI so that the performance matches the intended action with the instrument in the digital format. And because you're not dealing with something that responds to the natural acoustic or electronic behavior of the original source, MIDI editing gets you much closer to really articulating the instrument in a way that's convincing. So editing is gonna be your best way of really getting some realistic sounding MIDI performances. Now you can play it on the keyboard, but that fine-tuned edit is really going to make a big difference in terms of how realistic it sounds. Editing also allows you to create more dynamic mixes. Now, within this community, we talk a lot about mixing. I always get asked questions like, what's the best plugins or what's the best software for mixing and, working with vocals and whatnot, and working with, different types of mixes. There's some great plugins out there, and we can have a different conversation later about plugins and that kind of thing. But ultimately, your best results in mixing are gonna come with a well-edited production. Now, for example, a lot of people have questions about compression and what compressors to use and how to use compression and whatnot. And compression, I feel like, is a very highly overrated effect plugin for most people. People always talk about compression, but realistically, you can create a lot more dynamic control by using automation as opposed to compression. So with automation, when you're working in a DAW, you would have to edit the automation using the mouse or some type of pencil tool or something within the audio track in order to control the dynamics, the peaks and the valleys of the audio. But automation is something that I would consider to be a form of editing. And because you're editing, you can create more precise edits on the automation so that the dynamics are appropriate for the timing of whatever the recorded content is. So editing is really important for mixing, because editing is what allows you to not only control things like dynamics, but you can also get a lot more interesting mixes and create a lot more motion within your mix by way of editing things like panning and editing filter cutoffs and editing resonances and editing other parameters within the production. And that's a great way to get a mix that moves, that is exciting, that's interesting and dynamic. So if you don't get into the deep audio editing and the deep automation, you really come up with a static mix, and the focus becomes more about the instrumentation and the performance. And I think that's great if you're doing something that's really acoustic in nature. But if you really want a strong, dynamic, and competitive mix, you really want to consider using automation to make the song and the sound move a bit more so that the mix is more interesting, it's more dynamic, and it's not just at a standstill. But I think if we talk about mixing, if mixing is one of the focuses, if mixing is one of those things that you want to get better at editing. Because also, when we start talking about mixing, you want to make sure that you actually cut the audio in a way that helps you to eliminate unnecessary sounds within the mix. A lot of times when we're dealing with audio, you have things such as high noise floors, different noises, and other elements that may be unnecessary for the actual song that can be removed through editing. But if you don't edit them, then you try to fix them or hide that stuff somehow within the context of a mix. So if you don't already do a lot of editing within your production, you probably should get into a habit of making sure that you're spending that time looking at the details and fine-tuning the stuff. And that's just work. That is just editing at the end of the day. It's really about you doing simple actions like cutting and pasting and muting and silencing and dragging and dropping things. It's work. It's not something that gets into a lot of technology. It's just a lot of mouse clicking. But the better that you get at that, the faster you get with all the key commands and just being able to navigate within the arrangement, the better suited you will be towards making great sounding mixes and overall great sounding audio productions. Now, editing is also paramount to sound design, okay? Now, I'm a professional sound designer. I've done sound design for companies like Yamaha, Corporation of America. I'm currently a senior sound designer for Native Instruments as well. Audio editing is really one of the major keys to making sure that you have great sounds. Because if you create sounds, if you record sounds, you're gonna have to edit them. You're gonna spend time editing parameters on synthesizers and editing parameters within a sampler and editing audio and manipulating audio. So with sound design, it's not just recording sounds, but it's also doing a lot of editing and post-production to make the sound do exactly what you want to within the time frame that sound takes. I know some amazing music producers out there that hardly use any MIDI controllers because they can do all of their production using audio and MIDI programming. So they're really talented at moving things around and getting them in the perfect position within the timeline. And they've done things that I just feel like are amazing because they are that talented with that skill set. So I would say that editing can get you much better results in your music production if you're not that strong of a musician. If you can't play well on the keyboard and whatnot, being able to manipulate audio, being able to manipulate MIDI, that's gonna get you a lot further along than anything else can. And the reality is, editing is a major opportunity for music producers because it's one of those tasks that most people don't want to do in their production. It's the thing that is boring to most people. It's the real work for most people. And because that is the real work for most people, that creates an opportunity, especially when you have a lot of people that either don't have the speed, efficiency, or skill set to actually execute great audio and MIDI editing. Because at the end of the day, even the biggest artists in the world have to get their productions edited before it goes out to the public. There's always somebody in the studio for 15, 20 hours doing the edits after the artist has recorded and done their thing, done their creative thing or whatever, and go back to living the artist's life. There's always an editor, there's always someone there that's doing the real work to make the production actually come alive. So it's a major opportunity. It's an opportunity that I think a lot of music producers sleep on, and ultimately you can't let your pride get in the way of you being able to capitalize on this, because if you're a great editor, that means you're a great finisher. And if you're a great finisher, that means you're a great value to anybody that is looking to do audio-based productions. That's pretty much what I want to talk about today. Editing is one of the most essential skill sets that you can have as a music producer. Don't shy away from it. You can start getting into editing right now today. If you got some 4-bar or 8-bar loops in your groove box or whatever else you use to make music, bounce that stuff down to audio and start editing. Start cutting things, start moving things around, start playing with automation, start playing with parameters on effects and synthesizers, start editing. That's pretty much it for today's episode of True Sound Creators Podcast. Let me know what you think about this. Also, make sure, if you haven't already done so, go to ultrawest.com. Right now, we're holding the True Sound Creators Contest, and we're giving away a field recorder as well as a pocket operator and a free copy of my ebook, The Sound Mind. We're going to give that away to one person, one lucky winner out there. Go make sure that you get in on that contest, because I really am excited to bless one of you guys out there. There's a link on the video description as well. So if you're watching this or listening to this on YouTube, check the link in the video description. So that's it. Until next time, I just want to tell y'all peace and God bless.